giant of limitless power at man's command. And where was it science found that giant? In the atom, a particle so infinitely small that it takes over 100 billion atoms to make up the head of a pin.
This is Out of the Basement, a podcast dedicated to radiation medicine.
I'm Dr. Jason Bekta, and today we are going to go with another one of everyone's favorites, which is wRVUs and CPT codes, specifically talking about the RadOnc consult note, RadMed consult note. I can't even get my own rebranding correct, but as we wind up the year of 2022, and we will have new CPT codes released in 2023, I figured it would be a good time to talk about this particular super exciting topic, and specifically about in the context of E&M, or Evaluation and Management codes, as it pertains to our consult notes. And, there's each specialty has its own stereotypes about what types of notes it writes in what settings. And I think if people know about us, we have a certain reputation for basically writing our notes as if they are dissertations. I think I have seen notes that are more detailed than my own dissertation on cell cycle checkpoints and pluripotent embryonic stem cells. But I think that we have historically, as a specialty, really dug deep into the well of more detail, unnecessary detail, and hopefully we can shift away from that. So starting back at the beginning, when we were going into this digital age of electronic medical records, I remember thinking that it was going to be great, because obviously this might be a contentious opinion, but in general, I feel like the digital technological evolution has been great for us. It's made my life a lot easier. And by us, I mean just society in general. And we've really dropped the ball in medicine in terms of how EMRs and EHRs have been used and deployed. And it's really just made more work for us. So we have these chaotic walls of text with just an unbelievable amount of copy paste, which we'll talk about. But how did we get here? And so it responds back where, as medicine became more complex, we had to develop a coding system for a lot of things, but just like the Dewey Decimal System. So just like we were talking about last time with the wRVU system, and then we have the ICD system for diagnosis currently on ICD-10, and various other sorts of codes, like when there's a code brown, when a stool sample explodes in a pneumatic tube, which is always everyone's favorite. So we had to develop these coding systems to signify complex abstract ideas in a way that can be organized and essentially reimbursed for. One of the main things for the intent of the coding systems. And so lawyers bill by time and doctors bill by CPT codes, which are common procedural technology codes or terminology codes. And I almost just blanked there. I only call them CPT codes. These were invented back in 1966, and the CPT code is a 5-digit numeric code for basically all services and procedures in medicine. And they get yearly updates, really just to keep things interesting for all of us. That's not really it. That's just a happy accident. So when a patient comes to us for a doctor's appointment, reimbursement happens through us billing the Evaluation and Management, or E&M codes. And generally, I'm going to only focus on outpatient billing just because radiation oncology, we're primarily an outpatient specialty. There are inpatient consults, obviously, but the bulk of our work is done in the outpatient setting. So in the outpatient setting, in the inpatient setting as well, but in the outpatient setting, patients fall into one of two categories, either a new patient or an established patient. And that's generally defined as 3 years. So if a patient returns to the practice and was previously seen by somebody in the group a year or two ago, that is a returning patient. That is an established patient. But as long as at least 3 years have elapsed between the prior visit, then that patient is again considered new. But so we have new and established. These are further subcategorized into complexity levels of levels 1 through 5. Although in 2021, new patient level 1 was deleted. But so in the outpatient setting, it's levels 2 through 5 now, and that's for new. And then the outpatient established still has 1 through 5. All these codes have the digital or the 2-digit prefix of 99. And so like a complex new patient consult is 99205. A complex established patient follow-up is 99215. So we have CPT codes invented in 1966. And for decades after that, we had notes written on pen and paper. Now, I started working in a hospital really in 2003, scrubbing dishes, but I was a secretary on a psych ward on an inpatient mental health unit starting in 2005. And I remember pretty much everything was on paper. There was some computer-based stuff, but it was a lot of paper-based notes and documentations. And I really wanted, the further we get from 2005, I'm going to say it, 2005 is not that long ago. I just had my 36th birthday, so I feel like I'm still pretty young here. So 2005 was not that young ago, and really it was with the adoption of the ACA, or kind of the whole movement of that, with backing up a little bit here before that. So we have semi-illegible notes, but part of that was uniform billing requirements were introduced in the mid-1990s. So this is where I think those of us have grown to know and love the format of the standard H&P. And so for the E&M notes, 7 components determined what level was appropriate for a given E&M service. And that's where we have the history, physical exam, medical decision-making, counseling, coordination of care, nature of presenting problem, and time. And then there's further, more complicated subdivision rules. Obama's early presidency of just this incentive to increase the uptake of digital health records in an attempt to improve patient care and standardize quality, because, pre-med courses do not include calligraphy. And I can attest, and I've also created just charts that look like drafts of the necronomic, and it's really, my handwriting is terrible, and it's just not sustainable or really safe. So the government basically said, look, we're only going to reimburse E&M codes if the documentation meets certain criteria. And so regarding how you had to record the review of systems, the physical exam, and the medical decision making. And this just, you mix this all together, of these 7 components, with further defining rules of those components, really just to get paid for your services, more or less. And I'm sure we've all had just tremendous memories and experiences of people from the billing department coming to give us presentations with PowerPoints. I like the little laminated cards that some places will give, or the brochure type things, just any which way to try to communicate this to us about what was the right way to document. And what happened was really unsurprising. So we have these very complex rules about what needed to be included in a note to receive reimbursement. And then we had this adoption of these really clunky electronic medical record systems, and the natural tendency of human beings to err on the side of the complexity bias of just thinking that complicated is better and we look smarter if we put in more detail. But I think we all know what kind of notes look like today. And this particular episode was in part spawned by a JAMA, I think it was JAMA Network, JAMA Open, one of the JAMA offshoots journals last month, published a paper looking specifically at the use of copy paste in EMR, and they analyzed literally 104. That's a lot of zeros. They basically looked at a decade or whatever of clinic notes from Penn Medicine, and it's, of those insane number of notes, 50.1% of the total word count of pretty much like every note for a decade or whatever, I'll have to look it back up, were copied from a prior document. this totaled 16.52 billion with a B copied words. And I consider Penn, as I'm sure many people do, to be an excellent institution. And if a place like Penn is rocking out with 50% of their notes are copy paste and it's 16.5 billion copied words, it's not a great sort of thing we get going on. And actually in their discussion, it was very interesting about that the duplication is a rational response of clinicians attempting to manage information in a documentation paradigm ill-suited to the task. And basically that's what we've got, which is a whole other thing. And then in RadOnc, we've really mutated down a different path. We really love our details. We love memorizing pathologic complete response rates on the German rectal trial, but we don't like talking about practical beam energy selection for a sarcoma. Maybe one type of doctor will at one point, but that's not really emphasized in our training and education. And then humans, again, have this natural tendency to wear words and complexity like armor. And the thought is that the more details you know, the more nuanced and complicated your words and writing are, the smarter you appear. It's armor to us. And it's really, really gotten pretty crazy in some of the notes I've seen. And so we'll talk about my plea of how to do this, but looking at I have 2 slides about this. I'm trying to just break this down, and I'll post this on Twitter and Figshare, of the introduction of time-based billing. So in January 2021, this is one of the most amazing things that I have seen. I am just so grateful to the AMA for coming out with this and doing this in terms of improving patient care and our workload. I think this was very tremendous. And so in 2021, they moved away from these 7 components and allow E&M codes to be billed based on time or complexity of medical decision making. And now their estimation, and it's probably accurate, is that the majority of physicians will use medical decision making to bill. And, for me, I can only speak for myself, but I assume my experience is normal. Radiation oncology, our consults usually come at the end of the chain of the workup. And I've heard it described, whoever invented this word, it's probably been around for 20 years, but the phrase chart biopsy, I feel like that's the bulk of our work. I feel like the majority of us generally know what we're going to do before even meeting a patient, which if you think about it is drastically different from how every other specialty operates. So there's very few specialties like us where we come in and we have a gigantic amount of workup done up front. And the bulk of our work is done reviewing the chart, and meeting the patient is, just kind of the end result of that. We already know what we're going to do. I shouldn't say not always, but, generally that's the kind of the workflow. So I've been billing by time. And so it's broken down now to levels of complexity where a new patient consult 99205 is 60 to 74 minutes. And by time, that's just 60 to 74 minutes face-to-face with the patient. That's counting everything done on the day of service. So from midnight to midnight, and it includes things like preparing to see the patient. So a chart biopsy, just going through all the different tabs, reading all the tests and scans. And then if, you have a nurse or an assistant do an intake on the patient, it's talking to them about their impression of the patient, however that workflow is for you. Then actually seeing the patient themselves and conducting your appointment, any aftercare, scheduling a CT sim, scheduling other scans, talking to MedOnc or another referring provider, and then documenting that whole encounter. Anything not, so like care coordination, not separately reported, but basically anything you do in that day of service, the day you see the patient, counts. And I think it's safe to say that the majority, especially our new consults, so the majority of our new patient consults, if you consider the sum total of everything, is easily 60 minutes. And so I've moved over to basically just billing based on time for that. Same with follow-up. I would say, depending on the follow-up, there's 99213, which is 20 to 29 minutes, and 99214, which is 30 to 39 minutes. It's a level 3 and a level 4 complexity. I would say the majority of my follow-ups generally fall in that range. And so my consult notes, my follow-up notes, they all follow the same format, and that works amazing. I think just kind of doing that, modifying my templates, modifying things, it's really allowed me to focus more on the patient care rather than being told that I need to update my review of systems because I left something out. So the other one too is, some of our appointments can go very, very long. I'm sure we've all, especially if you consider everything that counts in this in time, and if you're in with a patient and family for an hour or two, you're blowing away that level 5 code. So there is a CPT code 99417, which is prolonged services. And now that's the trick too with billing. So this 99417 code, prolonged services, can only be used if you are billing the initial CPT code based on time. So if you're using medical decision making based on complexity, which I'll go into in another episode, I just don't use it a lot myself, but it's also been greatly simplified. So if you're billing based on MDM, you can't use 99417, but if you're billing based on time and you blow away that 60 to 74 minutes in a single day, you can bill this prolonged services code. And breakdown for this, because previously we were talking about RVUs, so there is a breakdown of how each of these E&M codes are weighted in terms of RVUs. And again, we care about the wRVUs in general, assuming the majority of us are tracked and measured and reimbursed and paid by how many wRVUs we generate a year. So a 99205, which is a level 5 complexity new patient consult, is 3.5 wRVUs, and a level 5 complexity follow-up, a 99215, is 2.8 RVUs. So actually, I think there's this conception of follow-ups are just nowhere near as quote-unquote valuable in terms of RVU production as consults, and it's not precisely true. Certainly a basically 60-minute follow-up is an intense sort of thing, but that's 2.8 for 99215 versus 3.5 for 99205. Then if you dial that back, so if you go to a level 3, so a level 3 complexity new consult 99203 is 1.6 RVUs, and at 99213, a level 3 complexity follow-up is 1.3 RVUs. So pretty close. It's much more equitable. And so I know sometimes administrators will misunderstand the difference, but they're pretty equivalent. And this has changed over the years. And actually that's been another change, is this update. So I should take that back. There's not been a misunderstanding. They have been pretty uneven up until this update. So again, 2021, and then with the change to time-based billing, and 2023 with these RVU updates. So for example, 99212, which is a level 2 follow-up, the wRVU increase was 45, almost 46%. So in 2022, that was 0.48 wRVUs, and it's now 0.7 wRVUs. So they've really amped up the RVU value of these, which I think really reflects more accurately the complexity of what we do every day, which is a whole other topic, and the undervaluing of the cognitive services of things like primary care doctors do. But that's a 3-year Ken Burns level documentary. That's and I have these charts in this figure. You can pull these up of looking at E&M code RVU conversions, but then just like we were talking about the last time, where then these RVUs have a dollar component attached to them decided by Congress for Medicare reimbursement, which is the anchor point for private payers pay us. And so in 2021, for some of the reimbursement conversion factors, 99205, new patient level 5 complexity, the conversion factor is $224.36, and 99215, the established patient follow-up level 5, is $183.19. So even the dollar difference is pretty close, again, because of the updates. And so generally there's been an increase, and you can get into the economics of that for another time. But so that's generally how I think of it, is, for the most complex new patient consult, 3.5 wRVUs, most complex follow-up visit, 2.8 RVUs. And in terms of just a dollar amount, even though this doesn't really matter, because as I've tweeted about or people have talked about, these numbers, the wRVUs are set but in terms of the amount a patient is actually charged, the amount an insurance company actually pays, the out-of-pocket cost to the patient, the amount of reimbursement of the physician or the facility sees is all very difficult to measure. But, it's generally around $200 is the Medicare conversion factor for level 5 complexity, plus or minus, right? So some other things just to throw out there, because I put it in here. Don't forget about 99406, which is smoking cessation counseling. So if you talk to a patient for 3 to 10 minutes, that's the actual number, talk to a patient for 3 to 10 minutes about quitting smoking, make sure you document it, make sure they're billing 99406. That's 0.41 RVU as well. I should look at that. There might be an updated one. It used to be 0.41 RVUs. And then if you go longer than 10 minutes, it's 99407 and 0.79 RVUs. And then you do have to make sure that whoever's doing your billing, there's a 25 modifier added on to the E&M service. If you're billing like 99205, do a 25 modifier and then bill for the smoking cessation. And modifiers are a whole other super fun, super interesting topic. So something I would consider in terms of changing how you write your notes, because I think the fundamental thing to communicate is that why are we writing? Why are we writing the notes? The residents, which is a whole other thing, showing off to attendings of making sure that or they know that the German rectal trial response rates. But there's a performative aspect. But fundamentally, you are a doctor, not a writer, right? So you are not Hemingway sitting out there drinking whiskey at 8 a.m. on the beach, writing the next great American novel. The purpose of you writing, of me writing, and by you, I'm assuming the clinicians listening, but our purpose in documenting, essentially at its core, is to communicate to your colleagues and to your future self what you did, why, what the patient status is. So all this fluff should be eliminated from notes, at least citations in general, which we'll get to. But a note should really just be as concise and clear as possible. And there's literature on this where, these behemoth copy paste citation filled notes lead to worse outcomes, where if a note is confusing, if a referring doc or someone down the road is reading your note and it is not clear what you did or why, that could potentially lead them to make erroneous decisions or assumptions and lead to worse patient care. So you are a doctor, not a writer, and your goal is to be as clear as possible. So now with these time-based billing, which is, again, beautiful, amazing, moving away from, I used to have these acronyms for, I don't even remember now. I want to say PEMDAS, but that's definitely incorrect for how I remembered all the components. So the current sort of iteration, just because I wanted to get cute for this, is BEAMIT, BEAMIT. And this is how I structure my notes now. So I move I try to get everything on one page. So basically headers and stuff excluded, but I want the med-onc who referred this patient to me to open my note and see everything they need to know on that first page. That is always my goal. BEAMIT. The B stands for bottom line. And this is my evolution of the one-liner, which was always funny to me, was the one-liner. Really stopped being the one-liner a long time ago. The way I write it, what I mean by the bottom line in that top portion is summarize everything that you would need to know to arrive at the same decision without looking at anything else. So for this, I'm referencing specifically like the NCCN guidelines. And so I try to write that bottom line. It sometimes it is one line, like for a just textbook prostate case, but I try to make sure that I summarize as succinctly and clearly as possible all the salient positives and negatives to get to the correct point of the NCCN pathway. And I write as if a week ago. So if I saw a patient today, what do I need to write to show Jason from a week ago so he knows lands at the exact same decision Jason from today arrived at? And generally, it generally stays about 3 lines, well, 3 sentences, depending on your size of your font, can be more than that. But that's what I want on the top. Just arrive your past self from a week ago at the exact same decision without opening anything else. That's the goal. So that's the B in BMIT. The E is elaborate, which is my evolution of the history. So then I shift down, and this is any additional information that comes from the face-to-face with the patient or family that helps with management. And I put in here, including personality traits. And so, those charts aren't perfect. So I read through, I do my chart biopsy, spend my time, I usually write the bottom line before I even go in. And then when I see the patient, anything that was not included goes in this E part. So things like today, someone had to drive very far to see me. So that goes in just as a reminder to myself about if that might affect management or if there's inclement weather or something like that. So elaborate is the evolution of the history and just things from your actual appointment, your actual discussion with the patient and the family that could be helpful to your management decisions. And same with the A in BMIT is appearance, and that's the evolution of the physical. So an ultra-focused physical exam, no more of this templated review of systems and ridiculous PEs or whatever. So this is just a couple lines of when I saw the patient, what else came out of that is helpful in explaining the status of the patient in my medical opinion and my management decisions. So then we go to the M, which is management, which is self-explanatory. So that's what's my plan? And usually what I do, because again, we're at the end of the referral chain. So if I have a stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer patient come, already seen med-onc, already had the workup, brain MRIs negative, all this other stuff, I will usually say I agree with the recommendation. And the recommendation is for definitive chemo RT. I will say I agree with the recommendation for definitive chemo RT, blah, 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 keep it brief, or I don't agree with the recommendation because of these reasons, and I will contact the med-onc, blah, blah, blah. So med-onc, I don't repeat the bottom line because I know a lot of people like to, in the old A&P system, copy paste the one-liner. I don't do that. I just either move on because those patients are already coming to me most of the time with a mostly formed plan. Do I agree with it? Do I disagree with it? What is and then further, for non-small cell lung cancer, am I going to do the 60 to 70 gray and 30 to 35 fractions? Am I going to do Westover hypofrac, 60 gray and 15 fractions? Do I actually think that we should do sequential, or is this SBRT or something like that? That's where I would spell that out. And then the final part of BMIT is immediate tasks. I always write, what are my immediate next steps? So what did I do from that appointment? Did I order more scans, lab tests? Or did I schedule a CT sim? Basically, where if the referring med-onc, the referring doc reads my note 2 hours after signing it, they know exactly what I did when I saw that patient. Obviously, as any good doctor should, I try to sign my notes quickly. But so that's I use time-based billing, and I use the sequence BMIT, everything on the first page, bottom line, elaborate an appearance from the actual exam, management, what's the plan going to be, and then what are my immediate tasks. And so where I deviate from this and go full rad-onc is if a patient is coming to me and they don't fit into the NCCN box, which obviously happens because life doesn't work the way we plan it. So if a patient comes to me and through my evaluation of the chart and the workup and the exam of the meeting the patient, I'm going to go off script. I'm going to do something not in the NCCN guidelines or something that's not expected. That's when I will go full rad-onc and I will say, based on these factors, I am going to do this regimen or recommend this regimen based on, this paper or this whatever. And, that way, because again, being a doctor, if you're going to do something unexpected, justify it, and I feel like it's totally warranted in that point. And I would say that to anyone, but if it's a run of the mill, like favorable intermediate risk prostate cancer doing 70 and 28 or 60 and 20, and, that does not need citations. You don't need to start pontificating about the PROTECT trial in your note. That doesn't add anything. And so that is my plea. Consider it really. Everyone else can do their own thing. I use BEAMIT because I like cute acronyms. Raptor is still my favorite. I'm jealous, but you're a doctor, not a writer. And try to talk to yourself in the past. Any of your notes should be written as if you from a week ago would be able to read it and instantly know what you did and why without looking at anything else. And that is my ultra dry episode, clocking in at 31 minutes on CPT codes and E&M codes. We'll see where we're going to go next. I'm sure it's going to be another riveting episode, but thanks for listening. Stay safe, guys.
This has been a Photon Media production. Don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen to us. Be well and beam on.